Hey, I'm David, 54 years old. I went through a tough divorce 8 years back with my ex-wife Vivian, who's 48. Our daughter Serena, who's 28, sided with her mum without even hearing me out. It's been rough, really rough. Vivian tried to smear my name, but what hurt was losing Serena's love. With just my mum, who's battling Alzheimer's, I've been feeling pretty alone. Coming to terms with it all hasn't been easy. It's taken nearly a decade to make peace with how things turned out. But I've realized something. It's not just the divorce that's been tough. It's the loss of my daughter. She's an adult now, and there's no way for me to be in her life unless she wants me to be. And from the looks of it, she's made up her mind. It's just me and Mum, fighting through the storm together. I tried to contact my daughter several times after the divorce, but she was dead set on being on her mum's side and didn't even try to hear my side of the story. At one point, my ex reached out to me and sued me for harassment if I didn't leave my daughter alone. That spelled things out for me, and I stopped contacting her. I spent the last 8 years taking care of my mum and focusing on my career. I've had a few casual relationships here and there, but I feel like I can't truly trust another person after my divorce. Anyway, that has been my life for nearly a decade. Sorry if I seem like a downer. The reason I'm writing this post is because my daughter recently reached out to me after all this time. I was over the moon and thought that she had finally come to her senses and understood that the divorce was not just my fault. It was also comforting, particularly because my mother Eleanor recently passed away, and I've been dealing with that grief by myself and was craving some comfort and family. So my daughter reached out to me a few months after my mother passed away. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize, and I picked up to hear a woman's voice on the other side. I didn't know it was my daughter, and didn't even recognize her voice because it had been that long since we spoke. I was quite shocked when she introduced herself. She said that she saw on Facebook that her grandma passed away and wanted to check up on me. I was taken aback. I didn't even know that she kept tabs on me online and thought that was sweet of her. I thanked her for calling and said that I was doing all right and told her that I missed her. We talked for a bit, and she said that if I wanted to meet and catch up in person instead of on the phone, she would like that. I was extremely happy and agreed immediately. We agreed to meet at my house over the weekend. I was excited about meeting her after all these years, so I am writing this post to share my excitement with anyone who might be reading. I hope we can rebuild our relationship again, or at least get to know each other. My daughter came over to have dinner with me because I wanted to cook for her. I was nervous and excited when I first opened the door. I didn't recognize her because it's been nearly a decade since I last saw her, and she was just a little girl back then. We started talking, and even though it was a little awkward at first, I think we both opened up after a while. She told me about her life and what she does for work, and I told her about my life. After dinner, we finally acknowledged the elephant in the room. I asked her why she never bothered to listen to my side of the story during the divorce and chose her mum by default. I mean, I admit that her mother was more present as a parent because she was a stay-at-home mum, and back then I worked in construction and worked long hours. But I always tried my best to take out as much time as I possibly could for my daughter. My daughter then said that she regrets how things turned out, and that she was too young to think things through, and got manipulated by how her mom made things sound. My ex-wife painted me as the ultimate bad guy who didn't care about anyone except himself. And since she never got to hear my side of the story, she never questioned whatever her mom said. We talked a bit more about this, and things were going well until she finally revealed why she was there. We had been talking for hours at that point, when I asked her what made her reach out to me after all these years. She looked a little uncomfortable, and I told her that she could be honest with me. Well, then she said that she had been keeping tabs on me through Facebook, and when she found out that her grandmother had died, she thought lawyers would contact her about her inheritance, and when no one did, she thought she should reach out to me personally. She said that she wanted to give me some time and space to grieve, but she had recently gotten engaged and could use some money to help out with the wedding expenses. I felt like I was getting punched in the gut, honestly. I thought that after all these years, my prayers were answered, and I could have a family again. But it turns out she never cared for me in the first place. And all this was a way for her to get her inheritance. The funniest thing is that it's not even her inheritance legally. It's all mine. And if only she wasn't such a terrible daughter to me, she would end up with most, if not all of it. I don't care about money. I never have, honestly. I live in a house of my own, don't have any expensive hobbies, and mostly buy my clothes from Target. Even if the inheritance wasn't in question in the first place, I wouldn't have minded helping out with her wedding at all, if she had reached out nicely instead of trying to take advantage of me and only caring about the inheritance. All of this was going through my head at the same time. Somehow, I maintained my composure and asked her if that was all she wanted. She got very defensive and said that the inheritance came second and her actual goal was to connect with me, and she would never forgive herself for not reaching out while her grandmother was alive. She said that she had wanted to reach out for years, but never got the courage to do it because she thought I would never forgive her for kicking me out without an explanation, and that she was also manipulated by her mom. But I could see from the panicked look on her face that she was just trying to smooth things out so I could forgive her. And I wondered if she was just after the money. I asked her how she knew she had an inheritance, and she said that a couple of years before the divorce, she was visiting my late mother, and she told her that she wanted her to inherit everything left by my father Maxwell, who passed away years ago, as she was the only grandchild in the family. I don't have any siblings, and at that point my marriage was fine, so I understand why my mother might have said that to my daughter. I mean, if the divorce never happened, or my daughter hadn't abandoned me for years after the divorce, the money would have been hers, as I've already mentioned. But the thought of her only caring about the money and giving me false hopes was crushing. I was devastated, but did my best not to let her know. At that moment, I thought the only way of testing my daughter would be to see how she would react if I told her that there was no money to inherit. I asked her how much she expected from the inheritance, and she made quite a decent guess. I could tell that some planning went into this whole thing. I then told her that I'm sorry to disappoint her, but that her grandmother left everything to me years ago, and I plan on using that money to start a business so I couldn't help her out. I offered to help out for her wedding with my own money by offering a few grand for wedding expenses. The disappointment on her face proved my worst fears. She said that she appreciated my offer, but as the only grandchild, she deserves at least some of the inheritance because it's her grandma's money that she was offered. I told her that I wished I could help her, but my decision was final, and there was nothing I could do for her. If she wasn't happy with the money I was offering, she went completely red in the face and started getting visibly angry. She told me again to reconsider my decision, but I reiterated that I was going to stick to what seemed right to me. That's when she showed her true colors and said something that confirmed all my doubts regarding her true intentions. She told me that she should have known that I'll always be the selfish a-hole her mother said I was, and she's glad I'm alone in life. Enjoying the story so far? Show your support by liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's dive back into the story. I looked at her with barely concealed disgust. Her words were hurtful, but at that point, I knew what to expect. I just didn't expect her to get that brutally honest that fast. That's all. She started to say something else, but I stopped her before she could speak. I told her that I should have known she was her mother's daughter, and that the only reason she would reach out to anyone was to ask for a favor. I also told her that using the fact that I was grieving for my mother to try and manipulate me was disgusting even for a person like her. She tried to say something at that point, but I just laughed in her face and said that if only she had not blocked me all those years ago, she would have gotten my text about her grandmother and would have probably gotten most, if not all, of the inheritance. That sentence had the effect I wanted. She looked utterly baffled and asked me what I meant. I told her to unblock me on her old number so I could resend her all the texts that could never get delivered. Well, she did. I forwarded all the texts where I begged her to hear me out, and even let her know that her grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I wanted them to meet before she forgot about her only grandchild completely. This was completely true, as at the beginning of her illness, my mum often mentioned my daughter and asked to see her. I remember how it broke my heart to not be able to fulfill that wish, and now this ungrateful, cruel child dared to ask for inheritance. To my daughter's credit, I will admit that she looked ashamed after reading all of those messages. She apologized to me but said that looking at these messages, it was clear that her grandma would want her to have her share of the inheritance, and it wasn't fair for me to punish her like this. She said that she was young and didn't know any better during the divorce, or else she would have handled things differently. She also told me that she genuinely wants to rebuild our relationship, and if I choose to be selfish now, she won't feel comfortable continuing our relationship. I told her that if money is what makes or breaks it for her, then maybe it's better if we don't have a relationship at all. I wanted to believe her when she said all that about rebuilding our relationship. I truly did. But at that point I couldn't. I told her that I would consider giving our relationship another chance. But the inheritance was out of the question. She looked at me with pure hatred and left my house. I didn't try to stop her at all. Since then, I've spoken to a few of my friends. Most of them agreed that I did the right thing, but one of my closest friends said that since I don't care about the money, I should just forget about it and let my daughter have at least some of it if it meant having family in my life. I don't agree with this, but ever since he said it, I can't get it out of my head. Should I give my daughter part of my inheritance? Update 1. Hi there, this post got a lot more responses than I thought it would. Thanks for your advice and opinions. It gave me the perspective I needed. I guess I'll start by answering the most common question. What happened during the divorce? I haven't spoken about it for years, but I guess it can't hurt anymore. So, my wife and I were married for 23 years. You'd think after all those years, she wouldn't be able to stab me in the back. But she did. I didn't want to get into the details, but I found out that she was cheating on me with multiple men. It had been going on for years before I finally found out. When I found out, I was completely devastated. I didn't know how to confront her, so I started drinking heavily and sleeping around as well. I nearly destroyed my life. I fought a lot with her, and I guess that and the drinking made it easy for her to manipulate my daughter into taking her side. After nearly a year of living like that and being separated, we finally confronted each other and got divorced. My ex-wife used to be a journalist at the time and is kind of a local celebrity. She used her influence to try to destroy my reputation and was nearly successful. After the divorce, it took me a lot of time to quit drinking and get back to my normal life. As I've said already, my daughter completely abandoning me did not help, to say the least. I'll admit that when I found out about my ex's affairs, I kind of went off the rails and wasn't present as a parent for my daughter. Even during the time I was separated, and for a year or so after the divorce, I pretty much always kept to myself and wasn't there for my daughter. But once I stopped drinking and got my life back together, the first thing I did was to reach out to her and apologize. But she refused to listen to me and blocked me everywhere. I thought giving her time would work, and she would eventually come around. But here we are 8 years later, and our relationship has only gotten worse with time. Now, the other big question is about my mum's inheritance. Well, technically the money belonged to my father. My grandparents were both doctors and had bought property all around the city during their careers. Most of it was rented out and ended up bringing in a lot of money. Dad passed away when I was 21 and left everything to Mum. All of it remained in her name during my marriage, and for a few years after my divorce, while her health was still right. After Mum passed away, I received everything as her sole heir. My wife didn't receive anything in the divorce except alimony, till she got remarried a few years ago because my mum owned everything at the time. So, the way things stand, my daughter never even got close to owning anything. She knew, of course, that her grandma was a landlady and owned a couple of Airbnbs. But I never touched any of that money because the money I made from my old construction business was more than enough to live comfortably. I hope I've answered all your questions. Also, my daughter hasn't reached out to me after that night, and I don't think she will, to be honest. I think she made it pretty clear that she only put up with this whole show for the inheritance, and now that it's out of the question, I don't expect to see her around anymore. I'd be lying if I said I am not at all upset about it, but at this point, I know not to expect too much out of people, no matter who they are. So, that's that, I guess. Thanks to all of you for sending support. I appreciate it. I also think it's maybe time for me to put myself out there and maybe get back into dating and find companionship, instead of expecting ghosts from my past to come around. Update 2. It's been quite a week, guys. I thought that would be my last and only update, but I guess life had other plans. Anyway, I had just gotten back from work and was considering going out with a couple of buddies when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, there she was, my worst nightmare. She had changed her hair and lost some weight, so it took me a couple of seconds to recognize her, but it's hard to forget someone you were together with for decades. Seeing her was quite a shock, to say the least. I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there awkwardly. She then asked me if I had a moment to talk about some stuff. I was hesitant, but didn't want her to stand there at my door, so I invited her in. It was awkward, as you guys can probably imagine. We made small talk about this and that, and then she said that she understood that this was a little strange, but there were some things she needed to tell me. I asked her to go on, and she said that our daughter reached out to her and told her about the inheritance. I think I kind of saw that coming. I mean, why else would she need to speak to me after all these years? Anyway, she said that she understood the divorce was really hard on me, and that she took things further than she probably should have. I just scoffed at that, but she ignored my reaction. She then said that I shouldn't punish my daughter for what happened between the two of us. She said some of the same things my daughter has said, such as her being very young at the time of the divorce, and how I can't be resentful towards her for choosing her mother over me. I just stopped her at that point and said that I have no resentment towards anyone anymore, and that even if I held on to any anger, it wouldn't be towards our daughter. I told her that I was hurt at the realization that after all those years, she only thought of reaching out to her father because there was a possibility of getting some money out of it. I told her the same thing I told my daughter, that if she had the decency to try and reconnect earlier, she would have ended up with the inheritance. My ex tried to put up some sort of defense, but I told her that my decision was final, and if they're just going to go around in circles about this one thing, then they're wasting everyone's time. I said that I had plans, and that if there was nothing else to discuss, she should probably leave. She nodded and apologized for bothering me, and I told her there was no need for that, and she left. After she left, I just sat there in disbelief. I never expected to ever see her again, let alone have a conversation in my home. It was strange and brought up a lot of old memories that I would rather not have thought about ever again. I went out with my friends and tried to forget all about it. So, yeah, that happened. And I needed to get it off my chest because thanks for reading along if you're still here. Update 3. I have another update for you guys. So this afternoon I was at work when I got a call from my daughter. I thought of not picking up, but curiosity got the best of me and I picked up. Straight away, I told her that if this was about the inheritance, I don't think there's a point in us having a conversation. She said that there was something else she wanted to talk about. I asked her to go on, and she said that she had been thinking a lot about what happened and felt she owed me an apology. She said that she understood that she should have done things differently, and that if I was willing to forgive her and give our relationship another chance, then she would be happy to have me at her wedding. I was taken aback, to say the least. I asked her if she was sure about it, and she said yes, and that I could take some time to think about it and let her know if I'd be there or not. I said all right, and we hung up. I'm really confused now. A part of me is overjoyed at the thought of being at her wedding, but I also can't seem to shake the feeling that this is just some way for her to be on my good side and eventually get the inheritance. At the same time, if she's being genuine, I don't want to sabotage my chance at being in her life. If I say no, and she never reaches out again, I could hardly blame her. I'd appreciate some advice if anyone would like to help me out. Update 4, I've decided to go to the wedding. Many of you said that going to the wedding couldn't do any harm, and I guess that makes sense. It's not like I have to do anything in return for being invited to the wedding. Also, no, I'm not in the wedding party. I'd just be a guest. I'm fine with that, as I understand that going from someone she hasn't spoken to in 8 years to someone walking her down the aisle at the wedding is a big leap. I do hope this is the start of a new chapter and that we can build something meaningful out of this. Let's finally briefly conclude our story. After the unexpected visit from my ex-wife and the surprising call from my daughter, I found myself in a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. Despite my initial skepticism, I decided to attend my daughter's wedding. It was a momentous occasion, filled with hope for the future and a chance to rebuild what had been broken for so long. As I stood at the back of the venue watching my daughter exchange vows with her partner, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure and renewal. It wasn't about the inheritance or past grievances anymore. It was about forging a new connection, one built on forgiveness, understanding, and genuine love. Throughout the ceremony and reception, I found myself reconnecting with family members, old friends, and even my ex-wife. It was a bittersweet reminder of the complexities of relationships and the power of forgiveness. In the end, I realized that holding on to resentment and bitterness only weighed me down. By letting go of the past and embracing the present, I opened myself up to the possibility of a brighter future, one filled with love, reconciliation, and second chances. As the night came to a close and guests began to depart, I made a silent promise to myself to cherish the newfound bond with my daughter, to continue healing old wounds, and to embrace the journey ahead with an open heart and mind. And so, as I walked away from the wedding venue, surrounded by the echoes of laughter and music, I knew that this wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of a new story, one filled with hope, redemption, and the enduring power of love. Thanks for watching. How did you find the story? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more awesome stories like this. Your feedback and support mean a lot.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. "I will do my best." Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. "Did you not hear what I said?" "I'm sorry." I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look, "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day." Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. "So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.